The content you are about to hear may be graphic.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Just a little bit. There we go. We've got a special guest. Bear!
Hi, Bear.
Anthony thinks he had to go to Spokane. And so we're babysitting. So... my brain went... Okay. Okay, I want to do a few videos about HIV/AIDS. This is another very sad case.
Oh, that was what you were reading. HIV/AIDS is not just a homosexual disease. You cannot get it from touching someone.
David Lawrence Kirby, born December 6, 1957.
David Kirby was born and raised in a small town in Ohio. A gay activist in the 1980s, he learned in the late 80s while he was living in California and estranged from his family that he had contracted HIV.
He got in touch with his parents and asked if he could come home. He wanted, let's see, he said to die with his family around him. The Kirbys welcomed their son back.
Aww. David Kirby passed away in April 1990 at the age of 32, not long after Frere began shooting at the hospice. Oh, it must be talking about like a video thing that people did.
Yeah, it's the lady that, pictures. But in an odd and ultimately revelatory twist, it turned out that she spent much more time with PETA, who himself was HIV positive while caring for David, than she did with David himself. She gained renown for her devastating, compassionate picture of one young man dying of AIDS, but the photograph she made after Kirby's death revealed an even more complex and compelling tale.
Frere photographed PETA over the course of 2 years until he too died of AIDS in the fall of 1992.
The image was published in Life magazine, which called it the picture that changed the face of AIDS.
The image shows Kirby near death, a vacant look in his face, and his father holding his son's head in a moment of grief. Ooh.
I'm sure you've seen that picture where he's really, like, he looks dead almost already.
I have, no.
Okay.
You'll have to show me.
Other members of Kirby's immediate family are seated next to him. Life featured the image in its November 1990 issue, after which it gained first national and then international attention.
The picture was later used by United Colors of Benetton in an advertising campaign with the permission of Kirby's family, who felt that its use would show the devastating effects of AIDS. He almost slipped off my leg.
While a patient of Peter Noster, Kirby established a relationship with Teresa Frere, a college student from Ohio University. Frere was at Peter Noster for college project and shadowing a caregiver named PETA, who was providing care to Kirby.
What? Oh. PETA was also HIV positive and formed a strong bond of trust with Kirby and Kirby's family. PETA, for his part, was an extraordinary and sometimes extraordinarily difficult character. Born Patrick Church, PETA was half Native American and half white. Frere says, a caregiver and a client at Peter Noster, a person who rode the line between genders and one of the most amazing people I've ever met.
PETA was a volunteer who helped others at Peter Noster House, an AIDS hospice in Columbus, Ohio, where he would see clearly before his eyes his own terrible fate unfolding. He himself would succumb 2 years later in 1992.
PETA was from Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
Because of the relationship between PETA and Frere, Kirby became familiar with Frere. He has said that Frere could photograph him in his declining condition as long as the pictures would not be used for profit.
Oh, that's... Frere was with PETA when co-workers contacted PETA with the news that Kirby's condition was growing worse and that his impending death was expected.
On the day David died, I was visiting PETA. Frere, who today lives and works in Seattle, told Life. Some of the staff came to get PETA so he could be with David, and he took me with him. I stayed outside David's room, minding my own business, when David's mom came out and told me that the family wanted me to photograph people saying their final goodbyes. I went in and stood quietly in the corner, barely moving, watching and photographing the scene. Afterwards, I absolutely knew that something truly incredible had unfolded in that room right in front of me.
Wow. I almost cried. Kirby's family invited Frere into the room to record the final moments of his life and their grief at his death. The family said that they hoped some good would come of the images Frere took of the final moments of their son's life.
When published by Life, the image shocked the national conscience in the United States with its graphic imagery.
While the public knew that AIDS killed, many only knew of its effects in the abstract. AIDS was still thought to be a gay disease, and much of the populace was relatively uninformed about the disease.
The image also helped the greater public to connect to the family's grief at losing their son. Life received complaints about the graphic nature of the image, but felt that it was in line with the magazine's mission of telling a story of life and death through visual imagery.
Makes sense. Frere's image also won the second prize in the 1991 World Press Photo General News Contest.
Following the life of publication, the Kirby family allowed the clothing company United Colors of Benton to use the image in 1992 advertising campaign, feeling that its story would reach a worldwide audience.
Fallout from the campaign came from many sources, including the Catholic Church, which felt the image was an inappropriate allusion to the historical imagery of the Virgin Mary cradling Jesus Christ after the crucifixion. I'm sorry, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, because
that's why I giggled.
The father's literally holding him in his arms as he's passing. So they're like, you know how the Catholic Church is.
Yeah.
In 2012, Frere told Life that David's father, Bill Kirby, expressed the family's feelings on the use of the picture by United Colors of Benton, who told her, "Listen, Teresa, Benton didn't use us to exploit us. We used them because of them. Your photo was seen all over the world, and that's exactly what David wanted."
As PETA's health deteriorated in early 1992, as HIV-positive status transitioned to AIDS, the Kirbys began to care for him in much the same way that PETA had cared for their son in the final months of his life. Oh, that's sweet.
PETA had confronted David, spoken to him, and held him, tried to relieve the pain and loneliness through simple human contact, and the Kirbys resolved to do the same for PETA, to be there for him as his strength and his vitality faded.
Kay Kirby told Life.com that she quote, made up her mind when David was dying, and PETA was helping to care for him, that when PETA's time came, and we all knew it would come, that we would care for him. There was never any question. We were going to take care of PETA. That was that.
For a while there, Kay remembers I took care of PETA as often as I could. It was hard because we couldn't afford to be there all the time. But Bill would come in at weekends, and we did the best we could in the short time we had.
Kay describes PETA as his condition worsened in the late 1991 and 92 as, quote, a very difficult patient. He was very clear and vocal about what he wanted and when he wanted it, but during all the time we cared for him, I can only recall once when he yelled at me. I yelled right back at him. He knew I was not going to let him get away with that sort of behavior, and we went on from there.
Bill, Bill and Kay Kirby were
in effect.
Something came up on the screen. I was
Oh.
really with it.
I thought you were struggling with a word.
No, I lost my breath.
Just start from the beginning.
Bill and Kay Kirby were in effect the house parents for the home where Peter spent his last months. My husband and I were hurt by the way David was treated in the small county hospital near our home, where he spent time after coming back in Ohio. Kay and Kirby said even the person who handed out menus refused to let David hold one for fear of infection. She would read out the menu to him from the doorway. We told ourselves that we would help other people with AIDS avoid all that, and we tried to make sure that Peter never went through it.
Sweet. After the Benetton controversy finally subsided, Therese Ferrer went on to other photography, freelancing from Seattle for the New York Times, major magazines, and other outlets.
What the world has become more familiar with HIV and AIDS in the intervening years, Fryer's photograph went a long way toward dispelling some of the fear and at times willful ignorance that had accompanied any mention of the disease.
Bob Cordell, volunteer director at Pater Noster, when David Kirby was there, once said that Ferrer's famous photo has done more to soften people's hearts on AIDS than any other I have ever seen. You can't look at that picture and hate a person with AIDS. You just can't. It's sad.
Mm-hmm. Such a big stigma on it.
Oh, I remember seeing a YouTube video where this guy with AIDS had a sign in front of him that said, "I have AIDS." And he had a blindfold on. "I dare you to hug me." And people actually did.
Yeah, nowadays it's a little not as big of a deal, but I know, like, when I've cared for somebody that has had it, like, people were still scared to care for that person.
You just have to be careful. Mm-hmm. You're not gonna get it unless he bleeds in something that you have open.
Exactly. It takes quite a bit to
just be more careful.
Get it. Yeah, you literally would have to put blood in a wound.
Yeah.
And it has to be a lot of blood in a wound.
Exactly.
For you to get it. It doesn't happen in your saliva. It's just semen and blood, basically.
Well, if the blood got in your mouth, that'd be one thing. But if you kiss somebody with AIDS, you're not going to get it. Share drinks with them, you're not going to get it. It's only if their blood gets into you somehow, then you get it. But that's so hard to do. Like, even when you're caring for somebody, you just be careful.
Yeah.
It's not that
Wear
hard.
gloves when you deal with blood. Wash your hands. Make sure you don't have cuts or anything.
Exactly. Yeah, I've heard some people double up gloves just to be safe, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
They're just people, and it's not their fault. I mean, you can get it, and they used to be able to get it in blood transfusions and everything else. It's not just...
There's actually been recent cases of somebody getting it through a blood transfusion because somebody didn't pay attention. But that was a mistake. Mm-hmm. And that was like one time in the last
I'm going to say in the
80s
it was really a big deal. That's why they test your blood now before you donate.
Exactly. So.
Anyways.
Any questions?
Like and subscribe. What should we do next? And I guess I'll announce that again. Tomorrow we're going to start, because tomorrow's the 1st, right?
Yes.
Tomorrow we're going to start Scaroween. It's just 31 days of Halloween, but we're going to call it Scaroween. And that means we're going to do a new video every day, something scary, or arts and crafts with our niece and nephews, or we talk about famous scary authors or famous people that have died around that time. So
pay attention.
Every day.
Good stuff coming.
I might be exhausted, but it's going to happen every day.
We're going to do it.
Bye.